everybody. This is Echoes of War. I'm Craig from the Pacific War Channel, joined here by my co-host, Garav. How are you?
Greg, great to be back and really looking forward as we get into the more famous aspects of this mini series that we're doing.
Absolutely. And we are joined here by doctor, historian, and scholar, Daniel. How are you?
Yep, very good, thank you. Pleased to be here, and I'd like to emphasize doctor, but not physician.
Yeah. So,
But a good drinking buddy.
there you go. And of course, everyone's read the title of this is going to be one of the biggest crowd pleasers of all time. It's going to be the Battle of the Marathon. But before we jump into it, I'd just like to say, if you'd like to further support the channel, please consider joining the YouTube membership or the Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. If you decide to join either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, which will have 33 episodes soon and ongoing, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. But stating all of that, I think we should just jump right into it and let's just hand it over to Dan and take us through.
All right, so we've just left off after the Ionian revolt. The Greek cities in Asia have revolted with the assistance of Athens and Eretria. Persia has crushed the revolt and sacked Miletus, but now, because they've stabilized the western border of the empire, they have now started thinking of a little bit of revenge against both the Athenians and the Eretrians. So much to the extent that Darius, the Persian king, actually has, according to Herodotus, a servant whisper to him before each dinner, "Sire, remember the Athenians." They've got a grudge, and they're preparing to come over and exact it.
So the precursor to Cato the Elder.
Yeah.
And
Because, yeah, go on.
I was curious, as far as the expedition that's going on is concerned, this isn't only about the Greeks, right? There is something else. Wasn't there another part to the expedition?
So, prior to the expedition against Eretria and Athens, there is actually a Persian campaign in Thrace and Macedonia, which is modern-day Bulgaria, and it is commanded by a Persian general named Mardonius, who will make an appearance in the next episode. However, at this point, Mardonius has waged a successful campaign in Thrace and Macedonia. The Persians do have a land route, however, Mardonius has fallen out of favor since the campaign, and Darius, he really has such a vendetta against Athens and Eretria that he's just going to sail on straight towards them and take them out. At this point, Athens is actually locked in a conflict against an island just off the coast of Piraeus, called Aegina. Aegina is one of Athens' regional rivals and is hated to such an extent that they are partially what inspired Themistocles to build the Athenian fleet in the following episode. However, because the Greeks are busy locked in conflict with one another, and Athens in particular, this is a pretty opportune moment for the Persians to intervene. Furthermore, they do actually have the former Athenian tyrant Hippias, who had been overthrown 20 years prior. So they do actually have a casus belli, in addition to the fact that they're going to avenge the temple burned in Sardis by the Ionian revolt. Do you want to hear a little bit more about the campaign just before they reach Athens?
Are you talking about, I'm guessing that is the Persian general Darius's expedition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'll be good because it does set the stage, right? Because it was almost like a tornado going through, right? Because
Yeah.
he was quite thorough, to say the least.
Datis has about 600 ships at his disposal, and the route he takes is through the central Greek archipelago in the middle of the Aegean known as the Cyclades Islands, which includes the island of Naxos, who had previously defied the Persians prior to the Ionian revolt. Now, the Persians do make it to Naxos this time, and no one actually tells the Naxians beforehand that the Persians are going there, but the Naxians react in time and they get most of the population into the mountains and out of the city, The Persians then destroy the city and enslave everyone who's left. And then the Persians proceed an island hopping campaign, even making a stop on the sacred island of Delos. And it's quite interesting because Herodotus presents a story about an earthquake that takes place on the island of Delos, and he claims that it is the only earthquake in Delos' history. And clearly, this is marked out as an unusual event and also an ill portent of the events to come, because in hindsight, the Greeks then attribute this earthquake on Delos as a bad omen, as a sort of foreshadowing of all the sort of carnage and all the misfortunes to come. And it's actually quite interesting because although this is the Battle of Marathon is probably considered the most glorious moment in Greek history, as is the wider Persian Wars. This has such ramifications on the way the Greeks see themselves and on the individual prestige of cities, to the point where even in the Peloponnesian War later, people are still referencing the Persian Wars. However, just as it's a glorious moment for the Athenians and for the rest of the Greeks, it also is a moment of great calamity and misfortune, as evidenced by the fact that Darius is sailing his way through these Greek islands and basically conquering them as he goes along and enslaving Greeks, basically. So you have this sort of dichotomy of this glorious war, but also this great personal human calamity at the same
So
time.
Naxos was the first to fall, right? Like as I'm
Yeah.
showcasing on this map, and then Delos, as you mentioned.
And so the Persians island hop their way all the way to Eretria. And as you might remember from the previous episode, Eretria had sent 5 ships to aid the Ionian revolt. Prior to the
Uh,
Persian,
just a question for my memory: how
yeah,
many did the Athenians send? If
20.
they're okay, so proportionately, it's enough to give a cause, right?
Yeah. Darius is pissed at both the Athenians and the Eretrians. And Eretria is a bit closer, and also it's a smaller city to Athens, and the Persians have effectively been facing zero resistance so far because of the reputation they've gained from the Ionian revolt. So basically,
Would it also? Sorry to interrupt, but
basically
it's
all the
also
yeah, go on.
Eritrea, just as it's on the island of Euboea, right? It's not connected, so the scope of reinforcements is also diminished,
Yeah,
especially with a larger Persian fleet controlling the waters around it.
yeah, absolutely. And Eretria isn't a city that controls its entire region. So Euboea is split between different city-states like Chalkis, as you can see from the map, Eretria, Charistos. However, Athens does control the whole of Attica, and so they have a much larger population and much larger pool of soldiers to draw on. And the Eretrians know that they aren't strong enough to stand up against a Persian assault, so they do call the Athenians for help, and the Athenians do offer to send troops to help them. However, as is typically the case in Greek city-states, there's a bit of factionalism going on within the city. Some of the citizens want to stand alongside their fellow Greeks and fight the Persians, and others see an invading foreign army and think, oh, a bit of opportunity here, because if they defect to the Persians and open the gates for them, then they'll be the ones in charge of the city with Persian support. Eventually, word does get out to the Athenians, and an Eretrian citizen does actually sound the alarm. He lets the Athenians know that there's potentially a betrayal in the works and warns them not to send troops in order to preserve the Athenians. Thus, the Eretrians end up fighting the Persians alone. The Persians land. A 6-day assault occurs, and what do you know? One of the Eretrians opens the gate and let the Persians in, and they sack the city.
Sounds pretty typical. Like it almost feels like what we would see in the famous siege of Syracuse during the Second Punic War, since ultimately it was some opportunistic former Sicilians, Syracusans who took the city.
Yeah, and if you I don't know if you know a famous battle called Thermopylae, where the Greeks hold out, inflicting serious casualties on the Persians for a couple of days until someone betrays the Greek army and lets the Persians in.
Well, that's the next episode. Definitely
Yeah.
looking forward to that.
Eretria is sacked and the population are enslaved, and so Darius turns his attention to Athens. He sails his 600 ships into the Bay of Marathon and there makes landfall. It's one of the stories around the Persian landing is that the Athenian former tyrant Hippias jumps from his landing ship into the water, keen to embrace his homeland once more, but he loses a tooth in the process, and as he's rummaging around the sort of beach and the Mediterranean, he can't find the tooth again, and this is considered an ill portent for the campaign to come for the Persians. It's implied that Hippias will not be able to reclaim his kingdom, just as he can't reclaim his tooth.
Greg, at least I would just say it's good for Douglas MacArthur. Something like that did not happen on his return to the
No.
Philippines.
That would have been funny, yeah. Or he lost his like corncob pipe.
I mean, just quick digression. Patton nearly lost his pistols when he was
Yeah.
landing at
Yeah,
Casablanca, and that really worried his stuff.
really.
And I forgot to mention to the audience again. I keep saying this: if you aren't watching us on YouTube, you're not going to benefit from the large use of maps that help with locations, and especially in the case of Marathon, we're going to have it's kind of broken down in 5 stages as far as the maps that I have are concerned. So I emphasize if you can watch us on YouTube and please comment, what you want to see from us in the future. But carry on, Dan.
Now, the Bay of Marathon is actually close to good pasture land where the Persians can feed their horses. So logistically speaking, it is sound. You wouldn't want to stay there forever, which which does play into the Greek battle plan. So the Athenians have at their disposal, according to ancient historians, about 10,000 men, 9,000 Athenians, in addition to some unexplained number of freed slaves who were in Athens, but they were freed in order to provide in exchange for military. They basically asked for military service in exchange for their freedom, basically. And it's not an unusual thing in Athens to do in an emergency. This does happen in Athenian later history during the Peloponnesian War. In addition, they have
And you could also make the case for the Romans after the Battle of
yeah.
Cannae.
In addition, they have at their disposal 1,000 Plataean allies. Plataea is a Boeotian town just on the border of Attica, and they do tend to be a pretty stalwart Athenian ally, both in the Persian Wars and in the Peloponnesian War. So there are 10,000, about 10,000 soldiers. The Athenian soldiers are organized into their tribal units, and the tribes are a unit of the Athenian political system, where it's basically the basic level of Athenian organization is a deme, which is more or less a sort of village in Attica, and lots of demes then make up a tribe. And there are 10 tribes of Athens, each named after a mythical hero connected to Athenian history. The Athenian battle
Could you,
plan. Yep.
do you mind if you just give like maybe an example of these like the heroes that they're named after? I think it would just be pretty cool, like because different
Yeah.
states have always claimed descendancy from different heroes of the Greek mythos. So I think it would be pretty cool, you know.
Yep. Uh, one tribe it's called the Eretrians, and they're named after the Athenian hero Erechtheus, a very, very popular figure in Athenian mythological history. And there's also another quite this tribe I definitely remember from my thesis because they were just one of the most. This tribe had probably one of the biggest swaggers among the Athenian political system, where they were never allowed to come last in the theatre because of the sort of competitive spirit of their namesake, Ajax. Ajax, the infamous sore loser in the competition for the armor of Achilles, and because he
Doesn't
responded.
Ajax also lose the race with Achilles to conquer the most towns and islands that were under Trojan control as well?
I wasn't actually aware of that story, but I wouldn't be particularly surprised if this was a thing. But but Ajax commits suicide following being driven mad by Athena after losing the competition for the fallen Achilles' arms. He loses to Odysseus. Obviously, Athena loves Odysseus. This was a bit of a bit of a losing battle, but Ajax doesn't take
Poor
it
guy.
well, and he's forever enshrined in Greek mythology as one of the greatest heroes of the Trojan War in valor and battle prowess, but also a really sore loser to the extent where this Athenian tribe in his namesake really aren't allowed to come last in the theatre. Each tribe will contribute, depending on its size and its population density, let's say around almost 1,000 hoplites. I'm happy to give a description of a hoplite if you're going to
Sure.
put a photo up.
Sure, Greg. I'm just gonna take over, like, because I think it'll be good that we just talk about not only the Greek soldier compositions, but a little bit of the Persians as well. So, one moment. Yep. I think this is just like a very simple one, which since it has the names, I kind of like
Yeah.
this picture.
The key parts of a hoplite equipment is actually his shield, which if you're a cowardly hoplite is also the first thing you throw away if you're going to run away from a battle. So there is a great deal of importance placed on the shield because not only does it protect you, a portion of the shield also protects your comrade to either side of you, and thus the hoplite phalanx is involves this set of overlapping shields like the scale of a fish, where each man is protecting the one next to him, unless you're one of the poor sods at the end, in which case you're constantly huddling up into the man next to you, and which does create a problem where phalanxes do tend to drift as this person on the end is trying to sort of huddle up inside the protection of the other man's shield. This shield, by the way, is called an aspis. You'll sometimes hear it referred to as a hoplon. However, hoplo just means arms in ancient Greek. So
So it's
it's
more of a broader term.
yeah, it's where we get the word panoply from. Like the hoplite panoply is the entire set of hoplite equipment. It's not just the shield. And so a hoplite is defined by the fact that they can afford to own this equipment and that they're wealthy enough to basically purchase and maintain this kit as a heavy infantry fighter. The primary weapon of the hoplite is his spear, a doru, and this spear is used for thrusting in the phalanx. You can thrust underhand, overhand, and this basically keeps any enemies at range, and also because you've basically stood behind your shield or the shields of your comrades. It's got good reach, so you can just attack without being attacked yourself.
If I'm not mistaken, they were around between 7 to 9 feet in length, the typical Doru. So usually, if I'm not mistaken, the front ranks only like the first 2 or 3 ranks would be able to like effectively engage in battle, right?
Yeah,
When it's
yeah, and that doesn't mean that the rear ranks aren't important as well, because if you're busy busting a gut, thrusting your spear, pushing in the front line, you really want to have that assurance that the guys behind you aren't running away. So
well, I think that's a really good reason why the Roman Optios stood at the back
yeah,
in the center.
hoplites do have a backup weapon. It's the xiphos. It's a slashing sword. It's a straight edge blade, which if the dory breaks, you can draw your xiphos and put up a good fight. It's a secondary weapon though, and you probably wouldn't use it if you had a spear available because it just doesn't have that range. It makes you a bit more vulnerable because as you try to stay behind your shield.
Is it more that because with the Doru you are able to hit without getting hit back
Yeah,
most of the time, whereas with the Xiphos you're like, okay, he can also hit me back.
yeah. I have a story from school actually where it was around the time that the movie 300 was, and people made a bunch of stupid cardboard weapons like cardboard spears and swords as part of the ancient history class. And I remember actually trying to fight someone with a Xiphos, fighting someone holding a Doru. Yeah, it didn't end well. I could not touch him at all. I'm pretty sure he ended up drawing blood, even even though the weapons were made of cardboard.
There you have it, folks. Spears were actually pretty useful.
Yeah, from my personal experience, I can confirm this. The hoplite is expected to wear a lot more than just a shield for protection. They'll also have a breastplate. This breastplate can vary. If you're trying to get a bit of a discount, you might wear linthorax, which is basically just layers of linen wrapped tight around each other to form this sort of ancient Greek version of Kevlar. It's pretty good for deflecting arrows, as well as glancing blows. If you're really wanting to splash out, though, you'll buy a muscled bronze cuirass.
Like what we have on the example here, right?
Yeah,
This is like the stereotypical hoplite.
yeah. And you'll also wear a helmet. There are different helmet variations, but probably the most popularly known one is the Corinthian, which is just which encloses the entire face, and it sort of has it really only has eye holes and a hole for your mouth. I don't know if you're able to get a picture of one up.
Just give me one moment. I'll just have to bring it up. I think for the audience's benefit, while I just bring up that image, just think of like what the Spartans in the movie 300 were wearing.
Oh, although we laugh about how the Spartans are presented in 300. It's if you look at Greek art of some hoplite battles, especially in mythology, a lot of the blokes are actually fighting in the nude with just shield and spear. So in terms of a romanticized representation of the Spartans, 300 wasn't too far off.
I'm gonna question like this Persian magician units that are throwing bombs though. Just
Yeah, and the immortal samurai.
yeah, but I guess this is the Corinthian helmet that I just pulled up.
Yep. Also, I've worn a Corinthian helmet. There's actually one in my attic right now. It's a pretty heavy piece of equipment. You wouldn't want to walk around in it for any longer than is necessary. You wouldn't want to march an entire day wearing all of your kit. So what usually happens is, if you're rich enough to afford a horse, you just trot along and have a slave carry all of your equipment. However, otherwise, all you probably hold is probably maybe the spear and the shield, just in case you get taken by surprise, and have a slave hold your helmet and your body armor for you. Because a lot of the kit is very heavy when you put it all on at the same time.
And I think we could just quickly add that they usually would have greaves, and some might also have the bracers, right?
Yeah. As with the rest of the equipment, hoplites supply their own equipment, so they're responsible for their own safety. And if you don't have enough money, what you can do is just purchase a greave, but purchase a greave only for the leg that will be closest to the enemy, and that will be the leg closest to the shield as you put it out. So your back leg will be unprotected, but the front leg, which is probably the most important one that you want that you don't want getting injured.
Well, that's I guess it
It's
isn't
covered.
soldiers for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is what
I think
happens when
it's
you have to buy your own equipment.
true. I think it is only Philip of Macedon was I think when large scale units started to get furnished at the state's expense.
Yeah.
And this is the question: all said and done, what could be? And let's just make the assumption that the hoplite is wearing the bronze breastplate.
Yeah.
What could be the total, weight with those Doru, Zephos, breastplate, Aegis, Corinthian helmet, everything? Like, let's just assume a fully armored guy.
About probably 23 to 32 kilograms of stuff on your back.
Yeah, I was gonna say about
Yep.
80 pounds. Yeah.
Well,
So
at
there
least
is,
one thing of
yeah,
the Aegis, it lets you smash.
yeah. The Aspis is really the heart of the hoplite because it not only protects them, it protects the man next to them as part of the phalanx. So, as I said, if you get a reputation for cowardice in an ancient Greek city, especially Athens, it does appear in Aristophanes, you will get mocked publicly as that bloke that threw away the shield that time.
Is it kind of like from that kind of like that statement that right you said the shield is what a cowardly Greek would throw first, which is
Yeah,
why the Spartans said you come back with your shield or on it.
yeah, exactly. Because you're not only just trying to get away from the battle to protect yourself, you're also discarding the shield and thus discarding the means to protect the man next to you. So it sort of shows a level of disregard towards the city for your own self-preservation. And hoplites are sort of trained from pretty early ages, basically when they're teenagers, by their local communities at this point in Athens to both trained as part of an education in both literacy, music, and also athletics. And and the Greeks do have an athletic event where you dress up in all the full hoplite kit and you run a race.
Those were also Olympic events, right? With
Yep.
proper laurels of wreaths to be
Yeah.
provided to the winner.
Yeah. So the Greeks knew that that if you wanted a citizen body, a citizen army that's fit, that's ready for combat, you really need to train them in this armor and acclimatize them to this kit. Because obviously, you can't just rock up to your first battle wearing all of this kit without any training, and it's just not going to end very well. So they do take steps to prepare.
All right. Should we just maybe talk about like how the Persians were armored? Right. Naturally, they were lighter and a more diverse bunch. Let me just bring up a picture. I just have.
As you can see, Persia at this point has an empire that stretches from the Mediterranean to the banks of the Indus. And even in, I guess, the borders of Persia itself, there are different sort of troop compositions because lots of different tribes and sort of communities all inhabit under the suzerainty of the Persian king. You'll have anyone you could have equipment ranging from people in leather jackets to with large square shields and a spear to sometimes even sort of Greek style linthrax with composite bows, as you can see if you're watching along and you can see the pictures. You can even get scale mail if you're one of the elite soldiers of the Persian immortals.
I think Exhibit C, as you can
Yeah,
see here on the picture.
yeah, and
But
and
on an average, they were more lightly armed.
yeah, the average Persian soldier drawn up from a corner of Darius's empire is going to be a lot less well armored than a citizen soldier of Athens. And what should be made a note of are the power of Persian bows. They're composite bows used primarily by nomads, dying nomads on the steppe, so they are quite powerful and they can punch through sort of light armor quite well.
Well, everyone knows about like the Mongol composite bows and how
Yeah.
effective they were. So it's predecessor, I guess.
Yep. It's roughly from the same region of the sort of Eurasian steppe area. And should be noted among the Persians, they do actually have subjugated Ionian soldiers fighting on their side now. So you also have Greeks equipped in Greek fashion fighting against their fellow Greeks.
Well, to be fair, Greeks keep fighting Greeks as well. So
Yeah,
I guess
nothing.
that's business as usual.
Yeah, nothing unusual about that other than the fact that they are fighting for the Persian Empire, which is of note. The Athenians, returning to the campaign at Marathon, the Persians have made landfall on the beach at Marathon. It's a pretty favourable place because they do have good pasture for the Persian cavalry, and the Athenians at this stage are debating whether or not they should march out and confront the Persians in the field, or if they should do as the Eretrians did and shut themselves up behind the walls. Because, bearing in mind, there are rationales for both. The Persians have come over with 600 ships. They can't stay there in the Bay of Marathon indefinitely. However, you also can't let the Persians have total control of the Attic countryside, because they're just going to burn everything down and pillage everything, and they'll get their supplies at the expense of the Athenians. On an added problem is that the Persians have brought an army of it's 600 ships. Ancient historians have present various estimates. All of them are overestimates. You have Plutarch saying about 200,000 men. Lysias in the 4th century, a century after the battle, when he's trying to sort of big up the Athenian achievement in a funeral oration, he claims that the Persians came over with 500,000 men. This is highly unlikely.
I thought it was 1.5 billion.
No, you got to wait a century for that. It doubles the further away you get from the battle.
So by that logic, what are we talking about? Like, Warhammer 40k levels of troop deployments now.
Just assume that the entire population of Persia crossed over into Greece, ready to destroy Athens.
Well, as the emissary said, right? They can drink the rivers dry.
Yeah. Our arrows will blot out the sun. At this stage, the Athenian generals in command of the tribal army are in a deadlock.
Sorry to just a little backtrack, but I think the modern consensus is around 35,000, right? For the Persian army.
Yeah.
Well, it still means that the Greeks are outnumbered 3-1. Or, as they said in 300, good odds for any Greek.
Yeah.
Psst. Hey you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself? Uh-oh, you live in Japan, and your Netflix doesn't have it? Must suck to be you.
Sucks to be me right now.
Oh wow, Season 4 of Demon Slayer is out. Oh wait, I can't watch it on Canadian Netflix, but it's over on Japan Netflix? Whatever will I do?
Oh, no.
Being blocked from regional content? With private internet access, you too can watch Demon Slayer Season 4 by switching your IP address to Japan.
Yes! Hell yeah!
Why stop with Japan? With private internet access, you can change your IP address to over 84 different countries and every single US state, giving you access to region-restricted content all over the world.
Nice.
Many websites and services like Netflix are only accessible depending on your physical location, but private internet access helps you overcome these restrictions. Think about it. Without private internet access, it's like paying for a TV series and missing out on the latest season. Shots fired, Demon Slayer on Canadian Netflix.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Ever fear people are gonna find your Google searches?
Banzai! Banzai! Banzai!
FBI, open up!
Private internet access makes sure that those Google searches remain a buried secret, as private internet access encrypts your internet access and has a no logs policy. Think you're safe with the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi? No, you are certainly not. Private internet access gives you more privacy features than any other software, and real-time protection from malware and trackers, giving you peace of mind knowing those Google searches remain seen by you and you alone. Private internet access has a no-log policy that they've defended in court, which means they are not storing any of your browsing data. Hey, are you like me using different devices under one household? Private internet access is available on all platforms and protects an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. I personally use private internet access to unblock movies and TV series from all across the globe, and I sleep easier writing scripts for my YouTube channel and others knowing my data is secure. Look, this is a no-brainer. Sign up with my link in the description of this video to get 83% off, plus 4 months for free, so it ends up being only around $2 per month. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available. So don't forget to click www.piavpn.com/the Pacific War Channel, and a big thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video.
The Greeks, the Athenian generals are in a deadlock. 5 want to wait it out, and 5 want to engage the Persians in the field. Of these 5, one is a general by the name of Miltades. He will be the general in command of the Athenian army on the day of battle. And it's on him that Herodotus attributes the most responsibility and prestige for the victory.
All right, just one question, if you don't mind, because the way you described it, it's not seems to be a fixed supreme commander structure. Did it go something like how we know like the Roman consuls, if they combine their armies, worked, that the commander rotates on a day-to-day basis, like the leader of the tribe would, one tribe would take supreme command, then the next day tribe number 2, then tribe number 3, like how the consuls would alternate command day to day.
That's an interesting question. The problem is that Herodotus doesn't actually answer it, and we don't really have a contemporary source that says that the generals took turns. What we do have is Plutarch writing a few centuries afterwards does have this story where on one of the preceding days, or the day of battle itself, it was actually a general by the name of Aristides the Just. It was supposedly his turn to take command of the army for the day. However, he sort of gave this day that he had to Miltades, and then Miltades came up with the battle plan that eventually defeated the Persians. So there is an account that the generals do take turns. However, nothing contemporary.
Or maybe like organized, like how, for example, like the Romans had. It was like a rule. So
yeah. This could have been an informal arrangement because generals tend to be quite specialized, educated individuals who tended to have known each other. They might have rivalries, but in this kind of situation, they're expected to put the rivalries aside and actually, work together. So it is possible that while there isn't a formal agreement that may or may not have survived in the literary record, there could have been sort of informal arrangements made. Now, as I said, the generals are at a deadlock. It's 5 versus 5. So the deciding vote goes to an Athenian public official known as the Polemarch, responsible for military affairs in Athens. He's not a general, as in he doesn't really command troops or formations. However, he is a pretty important figure in Athenian democracy.
Is it a political figure?
Yeah, he's a political figure, yeah.
But these 10 that we mentioned, right, who were in the deadlock, they would be called the strategoi, right?
Yeah,
correct?
The strategoi, correct. The Polemarch at this point is a citizen by the name of Callimachus, and Miltiades approaches Callimachus, attempt to persuade him to meet the Persians in the field, and he says to Callimachus that this is his moment, basically. It's his moment to decide whether the Athenians are going to be enslaved by the Persians, or whether they're going to march out, fight them, and win a great victory that will be comparable to the heroic deeds of the Athenian tyrannicides, who they believe liberated them from the tyrants, Hippias. Callimachus, and this argument actually works, because, funnily enough, Callimachus' hometown is also the same hometown of these tyrannicides. So he's very personally involved in this story.
Is it kind of like subtly Themistocles hinting at you best not want to associate with the bad reputation of like people from your hometown?
No, it's sort of, it's more like these Athenian heroes who overthrew the tyrants, who sort of personally were involved in the overthrow of Hippias. So don't you want to have this opportunity where you can make this decision and everything, and all of it's your responsibility, and thus your sort of chance for prestige and glory, and you can be like these heroes from your hometown.
Right.
This
So,
argument works.
so
And
the deciding vote is cast.
yep, deciding voters cast, the Athenians march out to confront the Persians. They choose to confront them in the field rather than in the city. Now, initially, for several days, the Athenians are encamped on the heights above Marathon, overlooking the plain and the beach. And this is a situation that suits the Athenians quite well. It means that the Persians are bottled up in Marathon. They can't just go out and ravage the countryside and feed themselves off of Athenian supplies. Furthermore, the Athenians had also sent a runner by the name of Phidippides with a message to Sparta asking for help, and the longer that the Athenians keep the Persians bottled up there, the more likely the Spartans are to actually reach the battlefield and fight. The only problem delaying the Spartans is the fact that they're currently celebrating a religious festival, and so they're not going to be able to march out until the full moon.
Could I just mention that the run Phidippides does to the Spartans, he covers 240 kilometers in 2 days.
Exactly. It is a major athletic achievement, and it's such an athletic achievement that there is a modern race called the Spartathlon, where you actually make the run from Athens to Sparta within the time limits. And if you actually complete this race, or if you win it, so you actually get your name engraved in like a plaque in Sparta. It's really cool. It's worth checking out.
Are you planning to do that? I know
No,
you
like
run the marathon.
no, I could barely survive the Athens marathon, so, let alone running from Athens to Sparta.
Just one thing I'll just add since we talked about the Spartans' religious festival. I think it's it's a bit amusing to me in like in the Hellenistic world and most civilizations you can even attribute at this time, right? The omens of the gods play a prominent role in deciding whether you would give battle, go for war, etc. And especially before battle, right? You have the sacrificial animal, and then the priest has to examine the entrails or whatever be the ceremony that has to be done to get the signs from the gods. Like I think a great scene is, for example, like what they show at the Battle of Gargamela in the Alexander movie, right? That's like a great example. I know that the Spartans used to go with two animal baggage trains
Yeah.
to the battle zones. One is just the normal, slaughter animals from where you are going to feed the army. The other is religious slaughter animals, because if the first chicken doesn't give you the signs, you just keep killing the chickens till you get the signs.
Yeah, Spartan sacrifices before battle ended up being rather notorious, to the extent where the Spartan kings, who were supposed to be furnishing the sacrifices, ended up needing a public fund in order to supply all of these sacrificial animals that they needed.
I think if I remember, I don't remember where read this, but a lot of the Spartan women, because I think by the way the state was structured, were actually the ones financing most of the wars, and the legal sense you could say, because they are the actual owners of the funds.
Spartan, as we'll cover in the following episode, Spartan society differs from Athenian society or other societies of other Greek city-states. For one thing, women can actually inherit property in Sparta, which is a very big deal because they can now, which is a very big deal because they can actually now pay for things that the city needs.
Meanwhile, Athenian women can't even leave their home.
Yeah, they need to be in a separate room. And the men, and if you read any of the orations of some of the orations of Lysias, I think probably the most famous one is Lysias 1, where it's the person who murders the guy who's cheating, who's his wife's cheating on him, and he murders the guy she's cheating with. But yeah, returning to the state of play at Marathon, it does actually favor the Greeks to sit around and basically wait until the Spartans arrive. However,
Not to mention the Persians are going to be getting low on supplies.
yeah, the Persians only really have what they've carried on from the ships and what they've looted from the places they've stopped by along the way.
And from our previous episode, as we said, it's not a trireme does not carry that much of supplies.
Yeah.
A few days at most.
Yeah, although the Persians would have most likely had, in addition to triremes, also supply boats, which triremes are quite slim and slick and sort of are able to cut through the water in order to ram enemy ships. The Persians would have also had supply boats, which are basically these wooden tubs that they can fill in with their horses and their provisions and basically send them across the Aegean. The only thing is that these supply tubs, the Persians have been on campaign longer than the couple of days they've spent at Marathon. They have eaten their way through their supplies already. Thus, Datis needs a plan in order to force the Athenians to either fight a battle or force them back into the city and pin them up there, and then his men can forage across the Attic countryside. So, his stratagem is to send his cavalry and a portion of his infantry back onto the boats, load them under the cover of night, and sail around Attica and land them at the gates of Athens and storm the city from there. Because the Athenian field army is now on these heights overlooking the Persian camp. If they have the element of surprise, the Athenians are supposedly going to be unlikely to assist the city if it comes under an attack. And while there are reserve forces in Athens itself, chances are the Athenians probably didn't bring, say, their youngest soldiers, or the soldiers still in training, or the teenagers, the Athenian youths. They
So
probably
it's
stay
basically
behind.
bottom of the barrel
Yeah,
in terms of quality.
you're looking at probably the soldiers still in training and the weakest soldiers. And while this strike force sails around and attacks Athens from behind, the rest of the Persian army will remain in the Bay of Marathon in order to pin down the Athenians on the heights, so that if they try to withdraw or sort of mirror the Persian march, they can attack and harass them as they make their way back to the city. It's a pretty sound.
One way or the other, you are attacking an exposed rear or underbelly.
Yeah, it's a pretty, as you say, it's a pretty sound plan. Apart from the fact that the Athenians find this out, because obviously you can't load thousands of horses and men onto your supply ships and your triremes under the cover of darkness without somebody noticing it. So it's at this point that Miltades knows that he has an opportunity to defeat a reduced Persian force on the condition that they can hightail it back to the city in time to stop Datis from landing. So both the Athenians and the Persians at this point have an incentive to fight, because even though some of the Persian troops have left to go back on the ships, the Persians do still outnumber the Athenians, and they're fighting them on the plain, where they can take advantage of their greater numbers. So on the day of battle, Miltades is aware that the Persians still outnumber him. So he does something very, very different to how hoplite phalanxes tend to fight. He extends his battle line by thinning out the central formation of the phalanx. So the phalanx is normally 8 men deep. The Athenian center at Marathon is 4 men deep, but it's much longer. And the flanks, the left and the right flank on either side of the thinned out center, they remain 8 men deep. So he's deliberately weakened his center in order to extend the Greek battle line in order to prevent a Persian outflanking.
I would say a Greek, keeping a thinner center compared to the flank wouldn't be properly seen for over 120 years until like the Battle of Lectura.
Yeah, this tactic at Marathon does actually end up being replicated by other ancient military commanders. The Carthaginians try to do it at sea against the Romans. The Carthaginians also do it again at Cannae.
Well, they also tried it at other battles as well,
Yeah. This is a gamble, though, because you are weakening your center, and if the center crumbles and gets routed, as happens to the Carthaginians at sea, then you've effectively got a rout where your two flanks can't support one another.
I guess with the Carthaginians, you were referring to Cape Economus.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Athenians, Miltiades and the Athenians know that the Persians still have missile superiority. They've got those deadly composite bows that can punch through armor. And so this is where the origin of the charge at Marathon comes from. The Athenians advance slowly towards the Persians onto the plain, and they keep their measured pace. They keep in formation, as they would normally do fighting another Greek phalanx. But just when they reach archer range, they go into a full headlong sprint towards the Persians in order to reduce the amount of time they'll have getting fired at by these Persian arrows. And the Persians looking on, seeing this line of Greeks charging towards them, according to Herodotus, they actually think they're mad, because you'd have to be a little bit crazy as a numerically inferior force to come onto the plain, give battle, and also charge headlong at your opponent. They actually think they're crazy, and they're also really surprised at the fact that these Greeks aren't even tired by the end of this run, even though they're wearing all this heavy kit. And this tactic works.
If I'm not mistaken, Herodotus, his original claim was they ran the entire distance from the start, and at the day of battle, they were 8 what is that unit? 8 stadia apart, which roughly translates to about 1600 meters or so, or a mile. But I think I definitely concur with you. They would have probably just broke into the charge just outside of missile range, because as we said earlier, these guys are marching with 20 to 30 kilos on their back.
This is one of those situations where a little modern interpretation and sort of sense needs to be involved in reading the textual source. In Herodotus' defense, he doesn't I don't think he actually. In Herodotus, he does say no less than 8 stadia, but in Herodotus' defense, he's sort of looking at the events of the battle sort of years afterwards, and so you could end up with this story being embellished where the Athenians do their sacrifices, they draw up, and they just run at the Persians. It's very much in the section where Herodotus is describing this prelude. It's very much a little condensed in terms of the chronology and the time. But he does say no less than 8 stadia, so he does sort of put himself in that pit, as it were. So after the Athenians make that charge at the Persians, the lines meet contact, and what the ancient Greek call the othismos, which is the great phalanx push, begins. the Athenians on the flanks actually managed to gain ground against their more lightly armed Persian opponents. However, the center, which is where Miltades had thinned his ranks, begins to give way, and actually the Persians end up breaking through the Greek center and
Can I
chasing.
just add, two of the tribes that were at the center were commanded by Themistocles and Aristides, who are going to play a big role in our next episode.
Indeed. Plutarch actually has quite interesting stories about Aristides and Themistocles, and also Miltades and Climacus as well, involved in the fighting at Marathon, because these tribes are fighting sort of next to one another, where neighbors are fighting alongside neighbors, Athenians fighting alongside Athenians from different parts of Attica. And so you have interesting dynamics where Plutarch will sort of say, and where Plutarch almost says that Climacus and Aristides are sort of almost fighting back, sort of fighting side to side, almost, because these tribes are next to one another.
It almost feels like what was the reason for the Lex Julia being passed.
Yeah. The Persians are overwhelming the Greek center. However, the Athenians on the flanks are actually doing very well. And incidentally, one of the Athenian tribes on the flanks is the tribe of Iantis, the tribe of Ajax, who still take pride, even centuries later, that their soldiers fought on the flanks and pushed the Persians back. While I was researching my thesis, I genuinely had this thought was, well, is it really something to be that proud of? Because you're in the easy part of the battlefield if you're on the flank at Marathon. It's the center that gets absolutely pummeled. But I digress. Once the Athenians managed to defeat the Persians on the flanks, they now turn on the Persian center, who are busy pursuing the Athenian center back on the plain. And they managed to catch the Persians in an encirclement. And the Persian army then, the Persian position then becomes a killing field because they're being attacked from all sides. And generally, when in ancient warfare, when you see the enemy come up from behind you, it's usually a good time for the entire army to run, and this is what the Persians do. The Persians, once they see the Athenians on their flanks and right behind them, they just make a run for it straight back to the ships. And the Athenians chase them the entire way over. And once the Persians reach the beach, it is absolute chaos, as all the Persians are trampling over each other, trying to reach the safety of their ships and lift off. And the Greeks actually pursue them so vigorously that they actually do manage to capture 7 Persian ships. And one Greek soldier even attempts to sort of grab one of the Persian ships in order to stop it sailing away. A Persian chops off his arm with an axe. He reaches up, grabs it by his other hand. The Persian chops off that hand as well, and eventually the Athenian then resorts to trying to hold on to this ship with his teeth.
Did he get his head chopped off?
I don't actually know. The story actually stops there because I think for the ancients the whole point of the story is sort of the vigor and energy that the Athenians are doing, that the Athenians have in trying to grab hold and stop these Persians from escaping.
Can I just also say that I can just see Themistocles in the back of his head with the 7 captured triremes saying, another fine addition to my collection.
However, the day's not over yet, and the job's not over yet. Even though the Athenians have routed the Persian army in front of them, there's still a Persian army sailing away back to Athens, ready to attack the city. And they've spent about 3 hours fighting the Battle of Marathon, and the Persians had a little head start when they loaded their men up on the ships at night. It's about a 10-hour trip sailing from Marathon to Athens, and you also have to give the Persians another couple of hours in order to offload all of their troops. Which in short, the Athenians really need to hurry up. They need to get back to the city. So even though all of the soldiers are sort of collapsed onto the beach, exhausted after fighting a battle, they do have to get back up and march all the way back to the city. And in one pretty, I think, ballsy move, they leave Aristides the Just, one of the generals, with with a contingent of his soldiers in order to protect all of the slaves and the booty that they've managed to seize from the Persian camp, which I think is a pretty ballsy move considering that the city could potentially be sacked behind them.
Well, got to protect their investment, right? Sorry,
Exactly.
the spoils.
Yeah, and Aristides, he's a sort of a man of excellent reputation, and probably one of the most trustworthy men and with the most integrity in classical Athenian history, and so he's the perfect guy at this big moment to keep control of all of this booty and all of this baggage.
Just, right?
Exactly. They don't call him the Just for nothing. Before the Athenians march back, so the story says, but not Herodotus, this ends up getting misattributed to Herodotus, but it's actually a legend given by the poet Lucian, where supposedly Miltades sends Pheidippides to run all the way back to Athens in order to announce news of the victory. Pheidippides is, well, he's had a pretty hard campaign. He's had to run to Sparta and back, fight this battle, and now he has to run from Marathon back to Athens, which I can say from experience is not...
That's like 500 kilometers of running.
Yeah, which I can say from experience, Marathon to Athens is not an easy run. Because Marathon is on the coast, and Athens, if you look at... There's a reason why Athens is sort of centered around the Acropolis, because it's on high ground. So running from Marathon to Athens is you're more or less always going to be running uphill. And this overexertion clearly shows, because according to legend, Pheidippides actually does reach Athens in time before the Persians. He announces the victory in the marketplace to the Archons, and then drops dead of exhaustion. And fun fact, on the road from Athens to Marathon, there is actually a statue of Pheidippides in his armor, sort of making that sort of struggling on that run. There's a modern statue.
I guess one thing of having such a move, right, of the runner coming, at least then the bottom of the barrel recruits would have the nerve to hold on for a few hours till the main army arrives.
Yeah. And the modern day race known as the Marathon is named after this very battle, where Pheidippides ran from Marathon to Athens.
Well, at least it's not named after the trip to Sparta. It would have been more.
Oh my god, yeah. I think of all, that's probably would be one of the hardest races in sort of running, basically, modern day running, and it is one of those races that probably wouldn't be turned into an athletic event.
Fair enough. What were the losses of such a battle? Modern estimates, let's not go with the, because I'm pretty sure the ancient historians might say 250,000 dead Persians, right?
So according to Herodotus, 6,400 Persian troops are killed at the Battle of Marathon. Modern estimates tend to be around 4,000 to 5,000.
Surprisingly not too bad.
Yeah.
The difference.
And according to Herodotus, about 192 Athenians are killed, including the polemarch Callimachus, who's then hailed as a hero afterwards, was he's the one who gave that deciding vote in favor of meeting the Persians in battle on the field, in addition to the Greek poet Aeschylus's brother, who also dies at Marathon. Aeschylus is actually a tragedian, oh my god, with a very interesting personal history, because he fights at both the battles of Marathon and Salamis. He's part of that generation of Athenian citizens, this golden generation.
I'm just thinking that 192 mentioned by Herodotus almost makes me wonder, is that why Caesar might have just said 192 at Pharsalus like 4 centuries later?
Maybe. You never know with Caesar. Always an excellent publicist for his own deeds. and both the Athenian and Plataean dead are actually buried in common at the burial mound at Marathon. So if anyone in the audience runs the Athens Authentic Marathon, which more or less takes you the route from the town of Marathon back to the Panathenaic Stadium in Athens, it's supposed to sort of homage the original marathon ran by Phidippides. You actually do a lap around the burial mound at Marathon, and you can actually visit it. And underneath it lie the Greek dead who were slain in the battle, including Callimachus. When Datis arrives at Athens, to his absolute dismay, he sees the Athenian hoplite army lined up, arrayed in front of him. So he's realized at this point that not only have the Greeks made it back in time to defend the city, they've also defeated his army back on the plain. As well, he knows that the Persians have suffered significant losses, and when his troops see that this army has just fought a battle, then marched all the way back, and are fully prepared to fight the Persians again, this is when the Persians lose heart and they decide that this campaign just is not worth it. Datis reverses course and sets sail back to Persia. But although the Persians have suffered losses, it's not like they haven't gained nothing, though, because they do manage to actually sail away with all of the Eretrian slaves that they took when they sacked Eretria earlier in the campaign. So they actually managed to reconstitute some of the losses, I suppose. It was not all for nothing.
Sounds better than what England tried to do with the counter armada.
Yeah. And so ends the Battle of Marathon. Probably, I think Herodotus states that this is the most glorious event in Athenian history. Of all the military victories of the Athenians, this is the one they celebrate the most, because it really was just them and the Plataeans, and they had to fight alone and do this extraordinary battle against the odds. They charged the Persian army, even though they were outnumbered. They fought, and they managed to march all the way back into the city before Datis could make landfall. And it's considered this amazing, for lack of a better word, military achievement. So it's such an achievement that even in the late 5th century, there are actually debates of whether Marathon was the bigger Athenian victory or Salamis at sea was the bigger Athenian victory. And there are sort of debates about which one was most important. To be fair, I'm more in favour of Marathon, to be honest. But
I'm interested.
the audience might have differing opinions.
I definitely do, but we'll leave that maybe after we finish Salamis, so that we can maybe give a small section for that.
Yeah. And
But I think one of the funniest, I don't know if funny is the right term, but probably interesting aspects of this battle is in the aftermath with the Spartans arriving finally in full combat gear, and all they just do is go through the battlefield, seeing the dead Persians, a few dead Athenians in comparison, and it's literally like how we just go to another city as tourists.
Yeah.
The Spartans were just doing that through a corpse-strewn battlefield. And like, all right, these Athenians did a good job.
Yep. The Spartans do arrive eventually, and they arrive in full kit. If I were to make a modern comparison, it's probably like, actually, you know what? It's like oh god, I was going to make a joke about Arsenal coming second in the Premier League and then rocking up late, but I don't know how to tie it in. But the Spartans remark upon the Athenians that they did a pretty good job at Marathon.
But knowing how, they were quite terse with their words, that's pretty much the best praise they are ever going to give the Athenians.
Yeah. And it is worth bearing in mind, like, I know we laugh about the Spartans being tourists on this battlefield, but up until Marathon, the Greeks had effectively been trembling in their sandals, thinking about the Persians and the Persian military because of what happened at Miletus, and then what happened in Naxos, and then Eretria. So at this point, the Persians are, even though they're more likely armored than the Greeks, this is complete
Yes, so the
opposite of
juggernaut.
how it started. It's complete opposite of how Aristagoras pitched them in the Ionian revolt. So the Persians are
Wait, I'm
actually
just-
feared before Marathon.
What people taking Aristagoras seriously, I think, kind of established it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
So for the Greeks, this is a enormous triumph. But for the Persians, is this not just a drop in the bucket?
Yeah, because Darius is not finished yet. He swore bloody vengeance against the Athenians. He managed to get the Eretrians. He's enslaved them and then shipped them back off into Persia.
So
But he's
part
still
of his
got to
promise
fight
is
the Athenians.
fulfilled.
Yeah, part of his promise is fulfilled. And according to Herodotus, Darius actually made an appeal to Zeus, firing an arrow into the sky and appealing for Zeus' support in his vengeance against the Athenians. So there is almost this divine religious legitimacy aspect to it as well. But as I stated in the Ionian Revolt episode, Athens was already at war with Persia prior to the Ionian Revolt. The Ionian Revolt really just peeved the Persians even more than how annoyed they were already at the Athenians.
So it's kind of like a small annoyance that actually gave us, like, a proper sting. And now, so what is the reaction of the, like, say, the Persian High Command and court on, like, in the aftermath of Marathon? That does set the foundation for the...
Yeah. Darius wants to go again at the Athenians. However, before he gets his second chance at revenge, he actually dies, and his son Xerxes takes the throne. And it's Xerxes who's going to try to complete the conquest of Greece and take vengeance for the temples burned at Sardis. But I suppose that's a story for another day.
Yes, it is.
Definitely watch the movies, people. It'll help you visualize what we want to talk about.
Because, in the movies, isn't it Darius is hit by, like, an arrow or something?
Yeah.
No, but all right.
Personally fired by Themistocles himself.
Of course. As Herodotus would have said himself, yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
And Leonidas made the God King bleed.
yeah. But
God King who although from Persia, also has a bit of Brazilian in him by the looks of things.
And is 8 feet tall, I think, if I remember correctly in the movie.
Fully waxed and oiled.
Yep. But,
And comes with giant Oliphophons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us the Battle of Marathon. I just want to say to the audience again, if you're not checking us out on YouTube, please do. We painstakingly going through a lot of maps and even figures to show you what the hoplites and the Persian forces would have looked like in this battle. And if you'd like to further support the channel, please consider checking out the YouTube membership or the Patreon account I have over at www.patreon.com/the-Pacific-War-Channel. By joining either, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. And actually, the latest podcast, it's not even history. I did a Lord of the Rings one, so it's looking at Sauron's... If you're looking at it from a military commander's point of view, what was Sauron's plan during the War of the Ring? So it's kind of an out there episode. But again, thank you, Dan, for gracing us with your knowledge. And we'll be back for Xerxes' campaign.
Looking forward to it.
Bye, guys.